A federal judge in California has just ruled that President Trump cannot deploy the National Guard in Los Angeles, that his takeover of the California National Guard and deployment of those troops on city streets in LA was likely illegal, that he must return control of the Guard back to Governor Gavin Newsom, and that it's very likely Trump also violated the 10th Amendment and California's sovereignty. Judge Breyer wrote, President Trump ordered that members of the California National Guard be federalized and thereupon assumed control of those forces. At this early stage of the proceedings, the court must determine whether the president followed the congressionally mandated procedure for his actions. He did not. His actions were illegal, both exceeding the scope of his statutory authority and violating the 10th Amendment to the United States Constitution. He must therefore return control of the California National Guard to the governor of the state of California forthwith. Now, as you know, President Trump stepped in over the weekend when he determined that the protests against his hardline immigration enforcement and ICE efforts in Los Angeles had gone too far. And he said California officials weren't doing enough to stop it. He invoked Title 10 of the federal code, which he said gave him the authority to assume control of the state's National Guard, overtaking the governor's authority to control his own troops despite Governor Newsom's objections. There are 3 conditions under Title 10 that do give the president the authority to take command of a state's National Guard, but all 3 of them hinge on a request from the governor. In the 36-page ruling, Judge Breyer said neither President Trump nor Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth have said which of the 3 conditions they are invoking under Title 10 to give them this emergency power. Not only that, but the judge also questions if any of those conditions even exist. Defendants point to the language providing that the president may call into federal service members and units of the National Guard of any state in such numbers as he considers necessary to repel the invasion, suppress the rebellion, or execute those laws. But their argument puts the cart before the horse. For the president to exercise his discretion as to how many National Guard members or units to federalize, there must first be an invasion, rebellion, or inability to execute the laws. The protests in Los Angeles fall far short of being a rebellion. Judge Breyer also said that he is ruling this way because it's very likely that California will prevail in their 10th Amendment challenge. The 10th Amendment of the Constitution says any power not specifically given to the federal government in the document of the United States Constitution belongs to the state. And California argues that law enforcement actions like policing protests under the 10th Amendment squarely fall into the jurisdiction of state power, not the federal government. Judge Breyer agreed, saying, it is not the federal government's place in our constitutional system to take over a state's police power whenever it is dissatisfied with how vigorously or quickly the state is enforcing its own laws. Defendants, no doubt, have an interest in protecting federal agents and property, but they have no legitimate interest in doing so beyond the bounds of their authority. Judge Breyer put a pause on this order that he just gave tonight until noon tomorrow. The Trump administration immediately filed a notice of appeal to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. So if you want to read Judge Breyer's 36-page ruling for yourself, I'm going to email it out to you in my Facts HQ email, so make sure you sign yourself up.